This is for my assignment in Systems Thinking's application on the issue of homelessness. First, I read up on the issue and made a diagram. After that, I went to the methodology and the approach, the boundaries, the level of events, the tools, the mapping, just to understand system thinkings and everything that is to it. After that, I went to the issue of global homelessness to understand the dynamics of the issue. After that, in terms of methodology, read an article with 7 stages on how to understand an issue of homelessness using soft systems methodology. The scope of the assignment is such that I can only focus on the first 2 steps, and that's the finding out phase, and that is in the real world and what's happening, and also stage 7 that was focused on action and how to get solutions and future possibilities and probabilities. After the systems thinking's methodology and when I decided on the stages, I went to the methodology applied in the 7 stages, and that was the approach, the objectives, the information that was needed, the natural resources, the rich pictures, the catwoe, the conceptual model, and then also how to get to the hierarchical levels, and eventually to find a solution or probability of probable solutions to the problem. I then went to learn more about causal loop diagrams, which is a tool used in soft systems methodology, just to understand how to do it, and I must admit not easy. That was quite a struggle. After that, the issue of South African homelessness was dealt with, and just to understand what is happening within the South African environment, and that was then plotted on a graph using the causal loop diagram. After that, it was another exercise just to understand homelessness and to have the goal of less homelessness, which I defined as the house, a house as the oikos of the future, where the home becomes a unit of production and consumption, using a South African perspectives against the global and national realities and the challenges facing local government. So it was done from the perspective of individuals being homeless and of local government. From that, the whole issue was then plotted after reading 10 articles. It was then decided sort of the so what, now what, and all the dynamics within applied system thinking, and also to get the structure, which I found extremely difficult, is to just see the real issues, the tipping points, the parts of the system, the timeline. After that, I've sort of mapped in a diagram just to see parts of the system, the relationships, the timelines, the tipping points, and that was then identified. It was easier to see the structure. It came out that the demographic bulges, the individualized citizenship and political governance, and national local government with global technology disruptions, the tepid global economy, and also now the global trade wars going on, and immigrants and refugees was important environmental agents within the systems or in the structure of homelessness. It was parts of the system is identified as clean governance, climate change, pressure on natural resources influencing government capacity. It was also the demographic bulges, especially in South Africa, where there is from 1985 till now 17 million black Africans, 1 million colored people as race, and then 285, I think, was it, Asian people that's in need of housing. Whereas with the white population, it's in minus 300 and some odd thousand, which put enormous demographic race bulges. There's also a youth bulge with the 0 to 14-year-olds being 26-27% of the population, which put enormous pressure on the system of housing and then as such on the system of homelessness. It was also immigrants from other African countries being volatile, politically volatile, acting on the system of homelessness. And then the global economic growth was an issue. I ended off with having a picture of the homelessness as an issue, which was first housing needs, the waiting list to get a house, population bulges being one loop, which got a balancing and a reinforcing loop, the waiting list to get in house, the house per individual, the house programs, the mismatch to policy versus implementation, and the parallel state. And then on the top you can see political pressure, where there's a reinforcing loop with housing needs. If you move up, there is the individualized citizenships, which is now a worldview, putting political pressure on mass social housing programs, putting pressure on housing delivery, the population growth bulges sort of on housing delivery and housing, well, the growth bulges having a balancing loop there. Then there was political involvement, housing need, corruption. It was then the homelessness and house allocations, houses to non-corruptive allocation, which is a big issue in South Africa within the housing system, where corruption and nepotism and patronage plays a huge role. After that, it was the crime and corruption, the shadow economy, putting pressure on sort of crime and corruption in South Africa, symptomatic housing solutions, the brain drain, political instability, the parallel state, the policy and reality gap, and then it was human vulnerability, the parallel state that's developing from crime and corruption, and also people being in shacks, creating a policy reality gap. From there, it was the climate change, which put pressure on natural resources, acting on pollution and disease, human vulnerability being affected, creating more shack and backyard dwellers, and putting more pressure on natural resources as a reinforcing loop. So, yeah, it was then the technology disruptions, with sales being affected, consumption of goods being affected, having impact on tax recovery of governments, having an impact on policy capacity, having an impact on clean governance, the policy capacity having impact on employment capacity, having impact again on technology adoptions that can't happen, impact on consumption goods as a negative, and employment of low-skilled workers again being reinforced. That being a reinforcing loop, and then homelessness putting pressure on tax recovery of government budgets. So it was basically the structure of homelessness was being found as, if we move on to this picture, it was found that the tipping points within the system was corruption, it was political pressure, populistic politicians, unrealistic citizen expectations, social rent, demographic bulges, especially with race and youth, age as a long term with a delay effect, competition for housing, employment of low-skilled workers, investment capacity in durable goods, and tax recovery capacity of the government. Also, the delayed impact of climate change in the terms of droughts, floods, and infrastructure damage, and the capacity of government and governance. So those sort of being the tipping points within the system of homelessness, with interesting relationships within the structure, the parts of the system being identified, and acting within a global environment, and to find solutions for homelessness. There need to be a whole redesign of events to form new structures. And important in terms of the future, if you look here, you can see that important factors would be rural development, population growth, skills development, innovation, research and development, reskilling of the labor force, government policy integration, government policy implementation, a match between expectations of housing between government and citizens, and a check and balances audit in the housing program. Things that sort of stay the same within the system would be that sort of basically as housing or the housing system and homelessness would sort of stay put. Things that can change is the home as a oikos. So that would be as a unit of production and consumption, and responsible government expenditure and government accountability, rule of law being applied, private investment, government capacity to be expanded, the skills base of the labor force broadened, economic transit from resources to knowledge, and how to deal with rapid migrations, which the assumption was made that would decrease in the African context. Yeah, so in terms of future redesign events, that would be having the entry points of youth, job entrants, and retirees, and that would be people not being able to look after themselves in times of retirement, would be oikos communes, which would be with youth schools of education and schools of skills. For job entrants, it would be school of life and school of skills and school of reskilling. For the retirees, it would be places of wisdom and places of expertise. And that would be then the house as the oikos, where production and consumption is sort of, or the oikos as a unit of production and consumption. So that is then the story of my systems thinking tour, which was exciting, frustrating, and eventually and hopefully I would be able to get the structure.